Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today I'm going to discuss a topic that I talked about 6 months ago, and that is NFTs. 6 months ago I said, I gave kind of a little introduction to what NFTs were all about, mentioned that, they may be doing a pump into the early summer, and they've done a crazy pump. Just nuts, insanity. And so you might have seen stuff about it. It's all the rage in many fields, probably because it's the most mainstream thing in crypto to date. But today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the specifics about where that market is at, should you invest, a little bit about the technology, what you should maybe know. I'm going to talk about something called the metaverse, which is a concept that Facebook has said they're pivoting into. And so kind of you understand a little bit of the narrative of what's going on, and we'll share some perspectives on this. So before we do that, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the all notification, tick the little bell. Go and make sure you don't miss out on any of our future videos. If you'd like help with forming companies, opening bank accounts, getting a second citizenship, residency, optimizing your taxes, asset protection, forming or hiring people, etc., please reach out to me. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer. We can help you with all of that in terms of the strategy of what's best for you, as well as the implementation of doing it. You can send a message to our websites, offshorecitizen.net or offshorecapitalist.com. Okay, let's dive in. So, just insanity. That's all I can say is insanity. To give some context, people have paid millions of dollars. Some of the people that I know have paid over $1 million for these NFTs, like really basic things. And if you look at them, of course, it makes no sense. Now, to be fair, paying $50 million for a Jackson Pollock painting also makes no sense to me. So I mentioned that in the last video, kind of crazy. So the question then is a few different things here. One is just really briefly, what's the whole thing with NFT? And then into, kind of what's the ecosystem that's developing, and then, what's the status right now, and what do I think about all that? So I have involved myself hardly at all in NFTs, probably to my, I probably could have made a lot of money at it, but that being said, I have a limited amount of time, and so I can't get into all of these things. So anyway, that being said, NFTs, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a technology which allows a digital thing to be unique. Now, of course, you can have copies of that thing, but you can verify the uniqueness of the thing, right? So it's a title is really like the easiest way of describing it, okay? That represents that, hey, this person owns this thing. Now that thing can get multiplied and duplicated, etc. So in other words, when somebody's buying an NFT, some CryptoPunk or something like this, some ape, something like that, the reality is they're not really buying the image, right? They're buying the record that they own the image that was originally created. So for instance, some of the earliest NFTs that were created were what are called ether rocks, and these were the original ones, and there can never be another original one. Okay, so that scarcity is a thing. Now, that's got actually, from a technology standpoint, it has a lot of utility because you can do things like fractionalizing it, which means you can create a market for it, which means you can determine what it's worth. You can pay rights and royalties to the original creator. You can put all sorts of functionality in it. So maybe it's like you enable functionality for somebody who owns it, et cetera, right? There can be lots of different things like that. You can have restrictions on who can transfer it and who they can transfer it to and all of that. So that's very interesting, right? This being said, the narrative that is out there right now for a lot of these is that these are kind of like avatars. So there's this concept of the metaverse. What is the idea of the metaverse? The idea of the metaverse is essentially that we're going to have this virtual world which will coexist with the real world. And you can kind of think of it like a video game that connects video games, right? So people can move seamlessly from one to the other and go through this process, all right? Fair enough. And in this metaverse, you could choose to represent yourself by this avatar, which you'd paid for, and everybody would know that, wow, this person has this, so therefore their status would be high. So there's a certain status play that comes in. Now, around this, I did a video the other day on networking with rich people, If you're somebody who owns one of these, kind of the club that you get into actually is incredibly powerful from a networking standpoint. A friend of mine who bought a bunch of really, really expensive NFTs is hosting some such event coming up here in the next few days. I don't remember the date, but anyway, it's with this group. You get to participate in these things. If you own one of these, I was just told today by a client that you can buy this and you're going to get all sorts of people who follow you on Twitter and reach out to you and all these different things because you own that. And the narrative is that this is going to continue over time. Is that going to happen? I think it's hugely speculative. Hugely speculative, right? It's likely that as a piece of history, some of these things will remain valuable over time, right? Jack Dorsey created the first tweet that was ever, I think maybe it was the first tweet ever, and he made it into an NFT, right? This sort of thing. So, there will be some of these which will survive over time and probably have some historic value when people look back. They go, wow, that was the first NFT. Oh, it's amazing. Oh, it's crazy. It's so cutting edge, and what was a big deal? And by then we'll have much, much more advanced technology and on, right? So from that standpoint, maybe there's some value. What's that worth? Who knows, right? Who friggin' knows? So my perception generally is that the whole space right now at this stage is very, well, it was speculative the whole way, but it's really speculative at the prices that things are selling for today. Like somebody's like, oh, hey, this thing's only $15,000 or so. I mean, that's not so much. $15,000, not so much for some kind of thing there, right? So in that sense, a little bit interesting. We'll see how it plays out over time. But I want to give you a little bit of how the narrative is, in my opinion, broken. So this is probably the most valuable lesson of this video, right? Because, whether you go and buy NFTs and whether that NFT, like you could flip NFTs for the last while and make a ton of money. So, somebody could buy an NFT for, a few $1,000s and it's worth tens of thousands of dollars the next day, sort of thing. So there's been lots of money to be made over the last several months. That's certainly true, and that may continue for some period of time into the future. How long? Who knows? At some point, because it's so easy to mint NFTs, you're going to get a huge amount of them, and as there's a huge amount of them, you're obviously going to have most of them not making money. Okay, and I've actually, my brother's into art. That's his background as a profession, and he and I were talking about it the other day, and he knows some people who, they've gone out and they're great artists, and they go and they create something and they make no money, right? So it's a really weird space in that regard. There's a lot of kind of marketing and artificial scarcity or artificial value around it that is not necessarily true of a bunch of these others. This being said, very interesting. What's the narrative? The narrative is this, all right? Axie Infinity, so for those of you who don't know, Axie Infinity is kind of one of the earliest games, and it's got, I think, 1 million users, they say, okay? 1 million users. And so they say, hey, listen, but look, Fortnite has 350 million users, and so we're still early, right? This is still very early. And the implication of that story, and this is, by the way, I wanted you to notice this about bubble behavior, okay? This is very bubble behavior. If you go back to 2017, when Bitcoin was going parabolic and people were having this conversation, they were saying, oh, hey, there's such a small percentage of people still using Bitcoin that, when everybody uses it, it's going to be whatever, however many millions of dollars per Bitcoin, right? That's the narrative. The problem with that narrative is that can be 100% true, and it doesn't mean it's not vastly overpriced, okay? So let's go and look at the example with Axie Infinity, right? So 1 million users, $3.5 billion valuation right now if you were to buy up the whole token, right? By contrast, Fortnite, which sells more digital clothes than real clothes for most major companies, right? Which has 350 million registered users, who only knows how many daily users, but a lot, right? Is owned by Epic Games. Epic Games makes the Unreal Engine, which is like probably the most famous of all the gaming engines, plus a number of other games. And their valuation just recently, under a new round of financing, hit 28 billion, okay? So 350 times more users, years of sustainability. They've been building, Fortnite started in 2017, So you've got 4 years of history, stability, all these different things. It's worth, about 8 times what Axie Infinity is worth. Does that sound in proportion? That's what I find concerning. It's not that it can't grow to 350 million users. Of course it can. The NFT space will grow massively, right? There's OpenSea as this hugely successful platform, and there's lots of these, right? They'll be big, or some of them will be big. The question is it a bubble? And the answer is, for sure, with 100% certainty, the prices are far, far, far ahead of the adoption. And that's, it doesn't mean that it can't go on for a long time. It can go on for a long time. But because it's lagging, that it's extremely risky. And so for me, if somebody was asked, I would not tell somebody to get into NFTs right now. I think you're kind of like jumping on a bubble that's already really inflated, and the chances that it pops, are pretty big. And so could it keep going for a long time? Yeah, it could, of course, keep going a long time. Do you have the time to learn and develop the expertise to take advantage of it at this stage? Probably not. Could you get in and get lucky? Possibly. Luck is, always a role. But I think in general, the space of buying these NFTs right now is not so smart. So where are the opportunities? I think the underlying technology is super interesting. Super, super interesting. Over time, we will tokenize everything. And an NFT is a unique token as opposed to a not unique token. And so you'll do a unique token for like pretty much everything, right? So over time, that's going to be very valuable because it makes it much easier for us to transact, much easier for us to track things, much easier for us to demonstrate ownership, much easier for us to collateralize, and so on and so forth, right? So tokenization over time will be a great way because it's just so efficient, right? That's very interesting. And so when you look at platforms that are able to do that, very, very good. Avalanche is building up stuff, Solana is building up stuff. We'll see how that goes. On the flip side, we're also likely going to have all sorts of games that are going to integrate various different types of NFT stuff. Like gaming is a big space, and it's going to continue to be a big space, right? For sure. And there's lots of people who are going to benefit, lots of content creators, etc. I think that's all very good. There's also possibly a big opportunity to create NFTs, because the difference, in my view, is when things are like going crazy, right? You don't want to buy the craziness. What you want to do is sell the craziness. And so how do you do that? Well, you can potentially participate in the process of selling. So if I was going to get into that right now, that would be the way that I would be focusing. I'd be focusing on selling into a market that is rapidly buying and see what could happen there. So anyway, those are some thoughts. I would love to hear from you guys. What do you think about NFTs? Do you know, etc.? Where do you think the market is at? Do you think that it's close to popping? Do you think it's not? Are you buying them? Are you participating in it? Have you done well? Some of our clients have done very well, and fantastic for them, like really, really good. For those of you who don't, yeah, I would love to hear from y'all. So put that in the comments below, and I'm going to look forward to seeing you guys on the next video.